Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Open Source Live. Today we are going to be kicking off the Public Library Association conference that will be held in Portland, Oregon later this month. My name
Hello,
is
everyone, and welcome
to Open Source Live. Today we are going to be kicking off the Public Library Association. All right, my name is Jessie Zaro, and I am the Director of Library Sales and Outreach here at Bywater Solutions today. We are going to have two amazing sessions that will be talking about everything community, everything from Koha community to the Aspen Discovery community and beyond. Our first presentation today will be a little help from friends, open source community during crisis and response. And our moderator for that session will be Kelly McGillicott, and we'll be joined by two library partners, Meg and Renee. So I'll let everyone do a quick round of introductions and we will kick things off. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, awesome. Again, as Jessie said, my name is Kelly and I am the Library Accounts Coordinator here at Bywater Solutions, and I'm happy to be here and let's talk all things open source today. I'll pass it over to Meg.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Meg Flynn. I'm the Assistant Director at the Grand County Public Library in Moab, Utah. I've worked here for about 12 years and have served in all kinds of roles, from circulation clerk to head of adult services and most recently assistant director. Do you want to give a little intro about our library also, or is that coming up?
We'll wait till we do all the introductions and we'll get back to you, Meg.
Great.
Thanks.
Sure.
Renee, round us off. Oh, you might be muted, Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Roundtree. I'm the Library Director for Washington County Public Library System. And like Meg, I've been with my library for 12 years next month. So I'm excited to talk to you about how to handle a crazy natural disaster.
That's fantastic. One of the things that we talked about, Jessie and I, when we were talking about doing a PLA presentation was just how to deal with crises. Of course, we're all going through this worldwide pandemic, but there are larger crises that have been happening. We have some examples at the end about libraries that we have been partners with that have also gone through other things that are not here with us today. And it's just kind of a good way to reflect, share your experiences, and be able to learn from those, and also hopefully help somebody else. So if that ever happens to them, then they're going to have the opportunity to have this knowledge already. So we're going to do this about like a round table, and I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions to these fabulous librarians who have gone through somewhat of a crisis in the past, and we'll go from there. So Meg, I'll start off with you. If you want to tell us a little bit about your library and the community that it resides in.
Sure. So Grand County Public Library is located, we have population of around 10,000 people in our county. We're fairly small and rural. We often joke for context that the closest Walmart's like a 2-hour drive away. But even though we're pretty small, Moab is a popular tourist destination just thanks to the proximity we have to some national parks. So we often are dealing with a much larger number of people because of seasonal workers or tourists, all sorts of other folks that are visiting the community. Our collection size is about 55,000 items, and staffing wise, there's 18 folks who work here with a full-time equivalency of about 11 and a half. We're primarily property tax funded public county library, with a budget of around $900,000 a year. And our main library building is in Moab, the town of Moab, which is the county seat. And it's currently open to the public now, Monday through Saturday, for a total of about 63 hours per week. We do have one small branch that we jokingly call a twig in the community of Castle Valley because it's quite small. It's a basically a wall of books in a community center that's out there. So we technically have a branch that's little. They were open prior to COVID for about 15 hours a week to the community out there, but unfortunately have since been closed, and the town controls that building and they have not reopened it yet. So at this point, they are offering curbside service out in that community for 3 days a week for a couple of hours. And I realized today we've been a Bywater partner, I think, for almost around 10 years. And yeah, I know, how exciting. And then we started with Koha in 2009. So are grateful to be part of that community.
Awesome. Great, thank you. Okay, Renee, take it away.
I am library director for Washington County Public Library in Florida. There's a lot of Washington counties in the United States. I am not by gorgeous sandy beaches. I am out in the woods, the rural woods of the panhandle of Florida. And I'm in the central time zone. So shockingly enough, everybody thinks that Florida is all Eastern. That's not exactly accurate. Our population is around 25,000 people. We have 4 library locations. Our main library location is in Chipley. Its population is around 3,200 people. Pretty much, I would say about 20 of the 25,000 people live outside of unincorporated areas. So everybody lives out in the country. Not many people are in town. And our hours reflect that. Our main library is open Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Literally people come in town for the week, for school, bank, church, whatever, and then they go back out to the country, and then they don't come into town if they don't have to on the weekend, which is nice because that means I have weekends.
It's a rare find. It's a rare find, Renee.
It is a very rare find. It is a very rare find. Our budget is around $600,000, which kind of fluctuates depending on a variety of things. We are, like Meg, property tax based, but we also receive something called the public state aid to public libraries grant that the state of Florida does. So that comprises about, I would say, a good third of our budget comes from the state, in addition to what the county puts in, and then whatever fines and fees or whatever that we are able to collect locally, especially with donations. I know that I'm also a rare exception in that money that is collected actually comes back into the library's budget. So that helps us considerably. So that's pretty much Florida. But like the real Florida, not the Florida with palm trees. There are not palm trees in Chipley. So yeah, just something to remember.
So Renee, is it like, oh, so go ahead.
I was just gonna say lots of pine trees.
Yes, that would be accurate. There are lots of pine trees, no palm trees.
Okay, so now we're going to jump into the fun part. We're going to talk about a crisis that y'all have experienced, and I'm going to reverse it, and we're going to head back over to Renee to start us off with. Just tell us a little bit about why we would pick you to talk about a crisis that you went through, and of course, we have some pictures too. We'll show.
Oh my gosh! Okay, I don't know how I feel about that. So like 2020 wasn't like a bad enough year for everyone that, 2020 was a humdinger, for lack of a better term, for Washington County Public Library. So in September 16th of 2020, our main library facility flooded from Hurricane Sally. If you asked anybody what Hurricane Sally was, they'd be like, what hurricane? All right. Nobody realized that it even came through. Like, I've lived in Florida my entire life. I'm like, I didn't even sneeze at the fact. It was like, it's a category 1. It's nothing, right? But the problem was it stalled over Washington County, and we received 20 inches of rain in 24 hours. And so we flooded 8 inches into our building. I'm just grateful that good drainage is essential. Just going to tell you this right now. It's not something that you think about, but it is. So we took 8 inches. The city hall next door to us took in 18 to 23. The fire department and the police department, which was behind the city hall, they took in around 24. And then in our ag center, which is on the other side of city hall, they took almost 36 inches of water into their building. So 2020 was the year of water, not even the year of COVID for me.
That is crazy town. Oh, Jesse's going to show I feel like that person in the orange is either in a really deep hole or that's more than 24 inches.
Yeah. So the reality of it is that so it kind of dips down into like a curve into our building, but like the guy on the far right is standing right at the entrance to the building. And then, the two guys pulling the boat that's our regular parking lot. That's right by the handicap spaces. And the crazier part was I was there that morning. Staff were told to not come in, obviously, but I'm exempt. So I was in my position as handling public information for EOC because I'm a county department head, in addition to being a library services director. So I was there and I didn't think anything about it. I parked kind of higher up because I'm like, oh yeah, maybe the city hall parking lot will flood just a little bit. But I was there 8:00, and by like 9:15, I was like, okay, I'm starting to get a little nervous. So I sandbagged the back door because there's a retention pond out the back door. I put on my black rubber boots and I walked to my car, and then I just hoped and prayed that everything was going to be okay. And then it kind of wasn't.
Wow. Let's just pause there for a second, because that's like intense. So Renee, what was your objective right from the beginning? Was it like, you actually wore two hats, you're a librarian, but you also were an EOC. So you were having to do a lot. What was your real, this is my motivation day 1 to day 5 or what have you?
Well, it was just really crazy. I mean, so by 11 a.m. that morning, they shut down the roads in the entire county because of water. And I couldn't make it to EOC because the weather was too bad. EOC is about 10 miles south of Shipley. And so I was at home on my work laptop, and then I was seeing pictures and everything, but they were like, you can't get on the road. It's just not safe. And so I was just kind of hoping and praying that things were going to be well, maybe it won't be too bad. Maybe the pictures are not as bad as I think they are. Maybe it's just up to to the sidewalk. I mean, maybe there's just a little bit of water into the front door. I'm like, it's not going to be bad. You start rationalizing, you talk yourself up to it. I'm like, it'll be fine. I'm like, we've got good insurance. It's nothing. You're going to be all right, And then the crazier part is that 24 hours later, Thursday morning, I was able to walk into the building. And then you're starting to see the damage. And I worked 12-hour days for 13 days. It took us 7 days to back up the entire library of what we could salvage. And then it seems like a dream now. I know I made it through it, but I don't know how I made it through it. A lot of caffeine. So
now, did you open at all, Renee, during this period, or were you completely closed?
So there are levels of floodwater, which something I did not know. We were flooded with what's considered category 3, which is black water floodwater, which is when they suspect that there is sewage and other things in your water that has come into your building, which is really unpleasant to think about for a lot of reasons. So the county has a disaster response team. They contract out a company. So those people showed up. I was the only person in the building. I told my staff my staff migrated to another location, or they took off until we could kind of stabilize things, because I didn't want staff to be exposed to certain things. Interestingly enough, I'd had like my tetanus booster because of Hurricane Michael 2 years before. So I felt like I was safe. I was wearing, I was wearing an older pair of sneakers that I tossed afterwards. But we moved a book drop to our county government annex and advertised. We increased hours at branches, but we were out of our building from September until March of 2021. And then we started unpacking into the building. And then because of COVID, our shelving was delayed. So something that would have normally taken a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, ended up taking like 12 to 14 weeks. So we opened with computers and printing and copying and those kinds of things and Wi-Fi. And then we closed in July when our shelves actually showed up. And then we took 3 weeks to unpack everything that was salvageable. Interestingly enough, our collection of 40,000 items that were salvaged lived on 2 refrigerated, climate-controlled with dehumidifier semis in our parking lot for months and months. And then we officially opened to the public August 2nd of 2021, and we were back full services. So, but yeah, at one point there were 2 semis, a generator, 4 porta potties, and 3 dumpsters, and 3 like big metal containers all in my parking lot.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
It was crazy.
I have no words, Renee, and I've seen the pictures and I've heard the words, but I think until you go through that, walking in that much water, seeing that much damage to your library books, and then also pondering like, what's next? How can we go from here, and what are our priorities? And I think that kind of crisis mode will make you a better person, and maybe now me too, knowing that like it can happen. You said
it made me grayer.
Okay, Meg, we're going to talk about the good old COVID, right, Meg? We're going to talk about what kind of crisis Meg went through in 2020, something that we've all experienced somewhat. And I think that it's good to hear other people's, because I love the silver linings, and we'll get to the silver linings at the end. But like, what did we learn, or what have we done that's made it better? Or, I'm going to let it go from here, Meg, because I don't want to talk for you.
Oh, sure. So yeah, our crisis of 2020 was the collective crisis of all of us going through the COVID experience. For us, what that looked like was the library director and I had gone to a training the week of March 9, 2020. We came home on Wednesday, and to find out there had been a pretty serious patron incident in the building that evening. So we raced home, and then the next day we were dealing with that, which was the Thursday of that week. And everything, COVID at this point was very much in the background. And then all of a sudden at 11 o'clock on Friday morning, Friday the 13th of March 2020, the health department called and just told us to kick everyone out and shut the doors. So there was not a lot of time to plan or prepare for that. It came on pretty unexpectedly. I'm not sure how other libraries ended up getting closed, but that was our experience. It was just swift and pretty exciting. And so then we were standing in the library at 11:30 on Friday morning, just wondering, what to do next. So.
What do you think, both Renee and Meg, as we've gone through this crisis, or y'all have gone through this crisis, I want to cycle it back to just open source and Koha and some of the advantages of what was brought to you from this experience, from that open source experience, whether that's, I can imagine maybe there were some staff projects that could be done at home, or it sounds like Renee might have changed locations. And again, we're working with an open source software, web-based, so that's kind of easier. If one of you, Renee, do you want to speak to that a bit? Oh, you're muted.
Whoops, sorry. Definitely
okay.
there are two things that I was immediately grateful for. One, that I had Bywater to reach out to, and two, that I don't host my ILS in my building. I mean, the fact that I knew that our ILS was safely on servers not in Florida was a huge comfort for me. To know that I didn't have to worry about any data being compromised, that I was still easily able to access our catalog, and that I had somebody who knew how to, I could submit a ticket and say, hey, I have this unusual situation. Can you hide everything that belongs to a certain library? Can you, there were so many things, and with COVID as well, how do you quarantine materials? And I'm sure Meg can elaborate on this, what she did as well. But yeah, it just, those were the two things that it was nice to have backup, as I like to call it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Meg?
Sure. I completely agree with what Renee said, being able to reach out to the community right away, knowing that everybody was going through some version of a lot of the questions we were facing. There was a real hive mind mentality that was comforting to be able to look to that, and then also not hosting anything here. We knew we could just reach out for help however we needed it. We, at the time that COVID struck and we had to close, we were also in the process of just having started switching over every single one of our patrons to a new different library barcode. And we had just been doing that as people were coming in the building. And so the reason we were doing that is kind of complicated, but mostly so that people could access digital resources. So all of a sudden, we had no way to get people in the building to switch out their library card, and a whole lot of people that were going to be interested in digital services that had not switched over yet. And so we were able to get on a Zoom call with Bywater right away, and you all helped us figure out how we could set up self-registration within that first week that we were closed. And so it was really only a matter of days that we kind of closed up and regrouped before we were able to turn around and begin offering all kinds of library services again, between self-registration to access digital resources, and then making curbside work was another huge benefit to all of that. So we were able to work with the community to learn how to get all our notices turned off, so that we were communicating, correctly. We mass extended all the due dates out until April, and then we ended up doing it again another time, everybody out until July. We couldn't get access to any kind of cleaning materials, and so at first we weren't taking anything back, and then we did start taking stuff back, but no one was touching it for a week at a time. So we had to have notices that were communicating to people, we understand you may have returned this item, and we're sorry, we're sure it's in the building, but don't worry, there's no late fines, and it's all going to work out. So we learned that turning on auto renewals was the blessing we never knew that was there, that we needed, so that things could renew while they were sitting inside the building and we weren't able to touch them. So lots of helpful silver linings there.
The big word I love that Renee said, and I think Meg said it also, is delegate. There are a million other things that libraries were handling, and to be able to delegate some responsibilities to somebody else to say, please do this. And I know, from I was working on the education team, and I remember libraries were actually thinking of things before I was thinking of those. Like they were already like, how do I customize my notice to say, thanks for returning this, but it's still going to show checked out, or what have you. Those details, it was great to see that collaboration and just getting those resources out to libraries throughout. And then, Meg brought up both things that the Koha community put together of that curbside plugin, which phenomenal that the Koha community, and that's why we love open source, is just they dug right in. We work from home, nothing's really affecting us. And also the batch due dates. Bywater was doing it for our partners, but there are lots of libraries out there that don't have a support company, and there wasn't the ability to do it through the staff interface before the community said, we've got to get this because people need this, this tool. So I really appreciate that delegation. And, I praise all the librarians out there that thought of the million things, e-resources, getting the material out to them regardless. Renee opened new branches. So, just being able to have that opportunity to say, I need to serve my public in a way that we're not forgotten, or, that we have people that have a need. So I really like that. What is I can't say the pandemic's over yet, but what are the future plans that you have, Meg, that maybe something that's gone on in your library that you're like, we're going to continue doing this, or this is how we're evolving because of the pandemic?
Sure. So we'll never get rid of curbside. That is such a wonderful service. And there's so many applications outside of the pandemic. Someone could have a sleeping kid in the car, or just, mobility. It's easier to have someone bring it out to you for folks. So that was great to learn how easy it is to execute that and just offer it to patrons without a lot of extra work for us at all. So 100% worth it. A lot of when we had the staff that couldn't be in the building, a lot of folks were looking for training opportunities from home. And so a real benefit that came out of that was folks watching Monday Minutes or other free trainings that were out there. And then people would come back to me with ideas about how to improve our system. So we learned how to and began using mark modification templates. We turned on the feature where, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it now, where the cataloger who was working from home was able to, while she was working with the items related to a record, see where it would go on the shelf.
The call number browse.
Yes, that's exactly it. So we turned that on so she could see where something would go in the library when she couldn't physically come in here. All these, and that now she just loves to use it. It's just a helpful tool. So, lots of, I know there's more silver linings. Those are two big ones that come to mind.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Great trainings.
Yeah, no, the training was a great opportunity for a lot of libraries. We would like to pay you to work, but you can't come to the building. How can we make you a better librarian? So from your house. Renee, Silver, what's here to stay, or what do you have in your now knowledge bank to say, I rocked that water crisis, and now I can tell people, or do you have a emergency binder or something,
I do have a go bag. And I have a folder. It's really a binder that says, in case I get hit by a bus, everything you need to run Washington County Public Library System. So it has been a working document. And I constantly think of other things to put into it. It has things like how to open a ticket at Koha, right? Or who to call when things go wonky. and like, but then it also has like general record schedules for records retention and those kinds of things, and like who, you know, the randomness, right? And some like brief history of branches. So basically, anybody who could just randomly step in. I think the biggest silver lining for us was definitely auto renewals. We actually finally turned it off last month, I think. So that was wonderful. And then also where we just essentially Bywater created a 3-day quarantine for books. So things came into the building and we just left them for 3 days. And so we scanned as we came in and wiped down, and then we just shut them in a room. And then I knew that we would just put a Post-it note on that book cart, and when the 3 days were up, they could just go out to the stacks. So that was wonderful. That was a huge silver lining. And then also going to a 4-day work week was the biggest silver lining. If you're not working a 4-day work week, I would highly suggest that you start talking to your people in charge who make those decisions. We started it I would say it was May, because the state of Florida closed for pretty much all of April. We actually closed March 19th, the library system. We were all working in the building. We activated with USDA summer feeding program early. We've been doing that for a number of years, almost 6 years now. So that activated early. And so we started feeding almost immediately. We are lucky enough that our main library location has a drive-through window. So we were handing out food, paper unemployment applications, all of these things that we needed. But I knew immediately that my budget was hemorrhaging from COVID, because all of a sudden I was spending a fortune just to get toilet tissue and Clorox wipes. And we were doing some PPE procurement for emergency management. This other duties as assigned kind of thing that happens when you're in a small county. And so I was like, okay, well, how do we pull this off? You know, what are we going to do? You know, like my county was spending money, and like, there's not limitless amounts of money in government, especially in small government. So we went to a 4-day work week, and we worked 4 10-hour days. And what it has done for staff morale, what it's done for me, and what it's done for everybody that I work with is incredible. And I don't think it would have been as easy if I'd not had somebody else who's handling the ILS, right? So I don't have to worry about things going bonkers or having issues, you know, and that there's an easy way to like change the calendar and tools in Koha. So like, it wasn't a biggie. We started it with Koha with COVID, right? Of course. And then we flooded. And then so when we reopened in August of last year, we just kept the 4 days, and I haven't had a single complaint from a patron about it. They are happy that we're open earlier in the morning, and they like that we're open till 6 o'clock at night. I mean, it makes for long days, but the reality of it is, I think we are able to do better service.
Wow. I'm jealous, really jealous. That's fantastic. 4-day work week. Oh, those are, I can imagine though, they're a little bit longer of a day than most people. You'd have to get used to that a bit. Now, what do you think your past self, have you learned in this crisis mode, either of you or both of you, throughout this process? You know, what have you been thankful for, or what have you learned as we kind of, Renee, definitely have emerged from your water, hopefully you've back in the building and all that. And Meg, what have we learned 2 years in, what have we learned thus far in the pandemic that really we're thankful for, and just, you know, that we have grown in this process?
Sure. The community is there for you. There's good ideas out there. It's great to just talk to other libraries all over the place and find out what they're doing, how they're dealing, share ideas. That alone, I mean, it's not new, but it was just so well reinforced, I think, with COVID and just the ease of talking to people over Zoom. I know we all get a little like overwhelmed with all the like virtual meetings, but still it's such a great, wonderful, accessible way to get access to people. For me, I often find it easier to talk through problems rather than try to write everything out in a ticket, and that has been super helpful, I would say. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, being out here pretty isolated from any other libraries too, you know, being able to connect in that way was hugely valuable. And don't be afraid of change. Everything could get thrown out the window in, you know, a matter of a couple of minutes, and you're, you know, just get creative and don't be afraid to try things. You're not gonna generally make it worse.
I like the generally not make it worse. Before I go to Renee, we did at Bywater, we did a couple of town halls and had librarians come and share their ideas, and we'll share those links with y'all. But it was just the opportunity. Some libraries were doing amazing things that they had thought of. And I unfortunately don't have that like ideology brain as much as other people do. And I really fed on those ideas to say, of course, that would be a great idea. So I think that brought people together as a common purpose in life, in our job, to say, we're here, we're librarians, we're going to make it happen. And we're not sure how, or maybe we should call the neighbor or go on the listserv, or, you know, go on the Slack channel or what have you.
Yeah, some of those, we had some great like town halls where people shared ideas about like using 3D printers to print the headbands for face masks because people's ears were hurting. You know, setting up self-checkout, because with Koha, you know, it's really easy to turn the self-checkout feature on, and a lot of people weren't using it, but they had spare like laptops or extra screens laying around, so they could set it up so they could limit the exposure with people. The QR code option, so if they were doing reference interviews, they could just turn their screen around and, you know, a patron could use their mobile phone to scan it, and then the catalog record would come right to their device. So like those were just like so amazing to just listen to what people were doing. I mean, to me, that's like the best thing about open source is just the community, to like hear those ideas, listen to what people have to say, and like just get chills thinking about it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like the Slack channel, like if you're gonna listen to anything on Slack, definitely the reports channel is like the best channel on the planet. Okay, like I don't like other librarians think of reports I would never dream in a million years to write, but they're there, and I'm like, oh wow, I would really love to know this about my catalog. And that has just been like a game changer for me. I have to be careful that I don't go down the Alice in Wonderland hole that is Slack channel and not do my other work, but it is really, really, really great. And, you know, it was really nice to see on the listserv people say, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. You know, maybe this will work for you. I mean, you know, I can't imagine anybody else handling curbside as fast. I mean, I know other people well, we won't talk about those other ILSs, but they're still waiting on things, or they have them, but they're an additional fee for the library. And let's face it, budgets are not going to be great for a while. So, you know, the knowledge that I got certain things for free, just because I'm part of open source software is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And I was thinking, go ahead, Meg.
I was just going to reiterate what Renee was saying with reports. So between the Slack channel and the Koha wiki, it became this magical place to go and shop for ideas for what to set people up with, both from work from home and like projects in the building when staff were back, but we still couldn't have many patrons in the building at once. And it was real meaningful, helpful stuff to have people working on while, you know, everything was kind of on hold in that way. And so that was just invaluable.
Absolutely. And I think we had a lot of people ask about auto renewals and self-registration and those metrics, the data that you could present to say, look at our astronomical numbers of how many people registered once we went into the pandemic. Like, they had no other resources. And that's like good kudos to librarians to make it happen. Like, we continue to strive, we continue to do better. And our staff were more educated by the end and learning ways to help patrons without them coming into the building. Fantastic. So we talked a little bit about, you know, a flood and COVID. We had a couple other little snippets of libraries that have dealt with other things. We didn't have people join us today, but we, during a migration, and I think we can share the press release. We had a migration of, well, I'll have Jessie talk about this one because, this one. Okay, perfect. During a migration, and this was 2020, I think as well, there was a mudslide, a natural disaster mudslide in Alaska that they were going through this smoothest migration they've ever had. That's what she first said. However, then they couldn't go live because they were 100% not able to due to mud. And, you know, she brings up to the point of like, Bywater helped us be able to just postpone it and move on. So wait a couple weeks, maybe the mud will dry up and we can do the bigger thing we need to do, but we need to focus on our library and our community and our people before we get a new catalog system. So that's something that's just recently happened.
And I love what they say, you know, 15 minutes of training had their volunteers taking over the circ desk so staff could work directly with people. I mean, that shows you just like resources that are available from the community and like just how intuitive Koha's interface is for them to be able to go in there and just, you know, quickly learn that system despite everything that was happening around them. You know, it was just incredible to read this and be able to work with them. And we have another one that one of our libraries actually went through back in 2018, Butte County Library in California. The Paradise branch was hit by the campfires in California, and we worked with their library as well. We worked with them to do a GoFundMe for their staff members who lost their homes in the fire, you know, and just worked with them to make sure that you know, being a part of that community and getting them back up and running when they finally could reopen. Here's a positive picture of their reopening, and to get things back up and going. So, you know, you never know what it's going to be: a pandemic, a fire, a mudslide, a flood, a hurricane, a blizzard. You know, just being able to be part of that community and quickly make a change within your system, I think, is just crucial, you know, in today's environment.
You know, and we'll you know, remind people that there are resources, the Koha community, as we brought up, the wiki, the Koha report wiki, the MANA database. There's a Koha listserv. If you're a partner of ours, there's a partner listserv. There's a partner Slack channel, which Renee loves, the report wizard, the report one. So do I. And it's just a way to talk to other folks and say, we're having a problem doing this, or what's a better way to do this, or what's a better workflow, or I saw recently, I saw Monday Minutes and I'd love a report on this, and somebody presented it. So it was like, we hadn't even gone that far in our thought process, but somebody was already getting to, how do I get that data? And I just love, you know, I get shivers just as much as Jessie does, talking about just the community, the ability to have things that are free, curbside plugin, all these features that were just rolled out and said, you know, get books to people, get resources to people. And this is the best way to do it. So, well, I think we don't have any questions, Jessie, right?
No questions. No
Okay,
questions.
perfect. Well, thank you from the bottom of my heart, Meg and Renee. I'm so glad to see y'all. I'm sorry we couldn't see each other in person, but again, conferences are open. We will be at PLA. So if anybody's at PLA, come stop by our booth, tell us your crisis story, or just anything you want to talk to us about Koha. And we're happy to be here for you to support you in any natural disaster or just day-to-day operations. And thank you, Renee.
All right. Thank you, Kelly and Renee and Meg again. And please stay tuned. We have about 15 minutes. Our next session will kick off for our group, and that will start at 4 p.m. Where we will be discussing the Aspen Discovery Community. So if you just sit still, we'll have a presentation on building library community virtually, where we'll talk about professional communities. And we'll be joined by presenters Sam Passy from Uinta County Library, Bob Benhoff from Aspen Cat, which is the Colorado Library Consortium, Tara Wood from Swan Library Services in Illinois, and Mark Noble from Aspen Discovery, along with Cal Marquise from Bywater Solutions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just about 3 minutes.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
All right, cool.
We have just one more panelist, I think we're waiting to join. So maybe we'll just give it like 1 more minute. And then we'll get started. Hello, the gang's all here. All right, we're going to continue our PLA Public Library Conference kickoff event. So we just saw another presentation with some of the Cohawk community. They were talking about libraries responding in crisis. So we're going to continue our conversation about community in today's presentation. My name is Cal Marquez. I work on the Aspen Discovery team at Bywater Solutions. And I'm joined with some of our fabulous members of the Aspen Discovery community today to talk about the professional communities that we build as library staff members, as librarians, and the kind of like the behind the scene relationships that help support the communities that we serve. And just some of the challenges and the opportunities that we have working in a remote environment. So I was hoping that everyone could just take just a minute to introduce yourself, let us know who you are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the libraries and the communities that you serve. So Mark, do you want to say hi first?
Sure. I'm Mark Noble. I'm the Aspen architect. I've been working in a variety of roles on Aspen in a variety of places for like a dozen years now. So it's really fun. I love working with all of our wonderful partners. So what's next? Sam, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Sam Passy. I'm the director of Uena County Library in Vernal, Utah. We have a library that operates with a local museum and community archive. We were the first library to use Aspen Discovery and be supported by Bywater Solutions. Happy to be here and share a little bit. And take it away, Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Benhoff. I am the manager of Aspen and we're located in Colorado, and we're kind of all over the state. By the summer, we'll have over 150 libraries of all library types: academic, school, public, and even prison libraries and some special libraries too. So it's a real unique mix, and we've been using Aspen Discovery almost as long as Sam has, and then a previous iteration of it working with Mark before even all that.
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm the User Experience Manager with Swan Library Services, which is a consortium of 100 libraries in the west and south suburbs of Chicago. And we are actually going to be live on Aspen tomorrow. We had sort of a cohort-based rollout, so we have about half of our libraries that went live in the fall. And so the remainder of our libraries go live tomorrow, so we're super excited.
That's awesome. We're excited too. It's been, how long have you been in implementation now? Like, has it been a year at this point? Maybe?
Maybe almost 2.
Oh.
It's been a while.
I hope there's some sort of pizza party or something that you're planning for tomorrow.
Yes.
All right, so today we're going to talk, like I said, a little bit about libraries in the virtual world, implementations, Aspen community, a little bit of everything. But if you want, we can just jump right in and we can talk a little bit about the virtual world. So I would just like everyone to just like go around and just talk a little bit about what challenges you've faced. I know in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, we've all worked more in a virtual environment, a lot of this, a lot of Zoom, a lot of less in person. So we'd like to hear a little bit about like maybe somewhat challenges that you faced in a virtual environment and maybe some successes as well. Whoever wants to get us started.
I can jump in. I will say, I think one of the challenges we've certainly had with members, I think it's more not necessarily a challenge for us as consortia staff, but for our library staff, having our user groups and member meetings as a networking opportunity. I can tell that folks are really missing that sort of, gather around the snack table and chat about what your library is up to. And that is really hard to do, I think, successfully in a virtual environment. But on the other hand, kind of a success that we've seen is we've been able to get engagement with more library staff that otherwise couldn't get away from the desk for the kind of whole commute, maybe even up to an hour away at a physical location. So there's quite a few folks that have liked the online meetings format and been able to get more involved in a way they weren't before.
Yeah, one of the challenges for us has been so much of the innovation that used to happen kind of while we were in the hallway of the conference room meeting with the vendor or with our colleagues, just the stuff that's not planned that just kind of happens. That's been a challenge for us to pick that up. But like Tara said, it does allow for more people to be involved. So instead of the 2 or 3 people from our library that might have had travel dollars to go somewhere, now 20 people can be involved if they want. So it's plus or minuses there, but it's been a lot of fun.
So I actually worked remotely before all of this and then was back in the office for a while. So personally, it wasn't as huge of adjustment for me, but it was a huge adjustment for the libraries we work with, who are not always as used to these type of technologies. But within that, I think there's been a huge opportunity because there was a lack of comfort there. And I think it's not all the way there yet, but it's better than it was. And we used to find that we actually had to go to the library in some cases to really get a sense of what was going on there. And if you think about how big the state of Colorado is, and there's mountain ranges, it makes it a little unwieldy to try to cover the whole state on foot. So we've had a lot more success with people being more comfortable in an online environment and being able to provide more trainings than we would have, because we could do multiple trainings at different places across the state in a day. Whereas if you're driving from one place to another, you're limited by how much time you're spending in a car, that type of thing.
Speaking of successes, does anyone have a success story? I know in the previous presentation, one of the librarians spoke about having curbside and how like that will never go away now. And like if it wasn't for this forced like virtual kind of world that we're living in, maybe they would have never considered that for their patrons. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has like a similar story, or maybe a virtual tool or a success story for either their patrons or their staff that they think that they would, continue to move forward with.
Well, I had a library that, and maybe this isn't something that'll help other libraries as an example, but there was a library that contacted me at the beginning of the pandemic that went, we don't really have a website, an online catalog, or any of these things, and we're closed, so we got to get moving with this. So we were able to move that library into a more modern time because that need arose. And I know they weren't the only one that has done that during this, but I think it was kind of a wake up call. And so curbside is like down the road. Getting like a website is higher priority.
One of the innovations that came up for us is I'd mentioned that we have a community archives that we run, and probably 90% of their document files are sitting in a box on a shelf, or maybe they're on microfilm. They've been really good about digitizing pictures because there's been a lot of interest in digital photos for a long time. But some of these documents, they're rarely looked at, but when someone comes in, they'll come in for 4 hours at a time. They couldn't do that. And so we found a way to quickly digitize these. Actually, we already had the PDFs because someone had took on that project when it was slow and they couldn't have patrons come in. So they're like, we'll just scan this stuff, but they didn't know where to put it. And so we were able to link all those PDFs to their corresponding catalog records in Aspen Discovery. And now people can browse from home and look at those. And once we did that, now the researchers are saying, hey, how about those oral histories? How about this other stuff that's just kind of there? And we're like, yeah, we can do some of this stuff. But and the other thing that it's led to is people living much farther away that are part of our community, expats maybe that have moved on, but still their heart is here, and we're able to connect with those folks and some of our colleagues and stuff.
Yeah, I think for us, a service we're seeing that we do anticipate is going to stick around quite a while is lockers and drive-up windows. We've seen curbside seems to be sort of some libraries have had success, others not so much. But the lockers and drive-up windows have turned out to be really popular, and I think in some cases more sustainable for the staff. And certainly it pushed us as a consortium to kind of figure out some better options for patrons to be able to select those drive-up windows and lockers as a separate pickup location, which was we were always sort of kind of told like, oh, I don't know, we can do something like that. And we were really glad that we could find a solution, and now patrons can just pick those locations in Aspen.
Yeah, I think the silver lining of everything has just been like the forced innovation in some cases, and like all the years of just being told no, all of a sudden it was just like survival mode of like, yes, like whatever we can do to keep moving forward. So I think thank you all for sharing that. Any like virtual tools that you all love or want to shout out that you've used in your libraries, or that you found successful with like staff or even patrons?
Some of the things that we've used, well, really not so much with patrons, but with our colleagues, things like Zoom and Slack, and the fact that all of us here in this room are spread across the country. I think I'd met Mark vaguely in person once about a decade ago, and then again at a conference last year. But so much of the communication, frequent, it's just, it's a new reality, a new dynamic. One of the things that's always been amazing to me about the Koha and the Aspen communities now are being able to not just have someone sell you some software, but kind of joining a community and what that looks like, and that you've got a seat at the table, and helping shape things, even if you're not the biggest spender in the room.
I think one of the things that we were surprised that was popular again after trying this years ago and having nobody ever watch them was doing some webinars for some training. Those were all of a sudden like getting a lot of looks and not just a good amount of people show up in person, but then also views on the video. We never used to get anybody ever watching any video that wasn't current, and now all of a sudden that's happening again. So it's not like a new or fancy technology, but it seems like some of the needs have shifted, and some of those older technologies are meeting those needs.
Yeah, I would say the biggest, we actually didn't have Zoom. We were using a different tool. And we ended up getting Zoom early in the pandemic because of breakout rooms. So that is my favorite. I think my favorite virtual tool is I found that having breakout rooms and meetings like kind of helps fill in that gap of the kind of lack of networking opportunities I was talking about earlier. Just kind of when you have a huge group of 30 or 100 people, if you're able to put them in some kind of smaller groups to do some group work and then come back and share, that's been super helpful.
Yeah, we've utilized that in our annual conference because we used to break people into groups, and it was a great chance for them to interact, and they miss that and they can't do it in person. And it's not the perfect substitution for it, but it definitely is something. It's a lot better than trying to get people to talk when there's 50 people in a meeting all at once.
One of the other cool things is that the saying is that open source software is free as in puppy or kitty that you've got to raise, not as in beer. And so we can take on community roles, we can join one another and kind of help with some of that work, whether it's quality assurance testing or just helping spread word about stuff, developing training materials. That's one thing that I've never got enough time to do is develop training materials. And so it's always so nice to have some of these larger systems that are in the room say, hey, we actually did a training on that. Here's all this stuff. We're happy to share it. And just this culture of sharing it. You might be raising that free puppy, but there's a really nice dog park you can go to and meet other dog owners and stuff.
Yeah, I also like to shout out the QR code during this time because I thought that was one of those technologies that was just dead, and we really tried to make it happen a couple years ago. And it seemed like every if you wanted to eat at a restaurant at any point in time, you had to know how to use a QR code. So I've seen that transition to a lot of libraries and library marketing materials, and that's one of those tools that I've noticed the last couple of years that has definitely made a renaissance as well. So all right, and we talked a little bit about the implementation process and the going live, as we call it, on Aspen or other big migrations during the last couple of years. So I think we have a couple different perspectives that I think it would be nice to share. So Tara talked a little bit about their slow rollout. I know we have some like continuous rollout, like Bob talked about. They're adding more libraries. It seems like all the time, every month, something like that. And then I know Sam is just a fan of let's just go for it. So I would love to hear your different perspectives of what an implementation or a migration is like, especially when you have to communicate that these changes are happening to your staff, your community, your patrons, your stakeholders.
Yeah, so I'll just go for it. We're kind of building the airplane, as we're going on this thing and figuring out, well, what parts do we need, what's mission critical, what isn't. And when we got to the point where we felt like, there's still some bells and whistles here that we're working on that we'd love to see happen, but it's got all the basics. We just went for it. And we one day switched the in-house OPACs over. We put out some flyers and things and took out some ads in the paper. I realized how old-fashioned that sounds, but around here in rural town, it does some good still. And we just went for it, and we kind of watched the statistics on the server, see how many hits are going, and every once in a while someone would ask a question. But with Aspen especially, it works the way you would expect a modern consumer focused website to work, as an account, as checkout options, all the things. There was no like user manual required for how to do the basics on it. And certainly as some things came up, it's like, it'd be really cool if there's a 30-second video about doing this or that or the other. Or I still have staff that are looking up good reads outside of this thing all the time. Do they know that they can get basically the same information by expanding a box? And if everyone's having to expand that box, can we just by default make that box expanded? And there was the granularity and flexibility to do those kinds of things. And we're all on one campus. Typically we can physically talk to one another, go shout in someone's office, and but we're in a partnership with a couple other counties, and we can't do that so much with them, and so that required a little bit more communication. But we're small enough that it was easy to make decisions and move forward. And I can only imagine that in the bigger systems, it's not the technology that's the hard part. It's got to be the coordinating all the answers to fill in those boxes at migration time.
So when we initially went over, we were using a kind of a different version of this original view find type thing that, like I mentioned earlier, Mark had worked on earlier. So it wasn't our transition for the big group of libraries wasn't as difficult because there were a lot of similarities, particularly at that time. But as Cal pointed out, we are adding libraries on a regular basis. So what we are able to do with that is we're able to talk with them and go through a series of questions and really get a sense of what customizations they need. And in some cases, if it's like a really small school district, maybe they don't even need it at this time, and they're going to look at it later. In other cases, it's definitely one of the attractive things that is bringing that library to our group. So we go through those customizations and make sure they get all set up. Unfortunately, things are flexible enough that we're able to ask a series of questions, put in a few hours of work to get all those settings in there, and then they can come in and they get pretty much what they want. And it's not like it doesn't really affect other libraries if they have those customizations, which is another great feature. For the most part, each thing it can be done individually, branch by branch.
Yeah, so I know we were probably the tortoises to your hair, but we started with setting up a test instance with Bywater. We knew that would be essentially like our biggest hurdle was not the technology. It wasn't the setup. It was just convincing our members that this is the way to go. They're a very savvy and opinionated group, and we wanted to make sure we could make everyone happy. So we set up a test and kicked the tires and identified some enhancement requests kind of off the bat. We also, partly because of our size in terms of, even though I think we have fewer libraries than Bob, but we have a lot of stuff. So we definitely wanted to make sure this kind of volume of the system could handle all that, because there would be nothing more terrible than, you go live in your Shiny catalog and it crashes. And we just had lots of bad experiences in the past with things crashing. So we wanted to avoid that. And then once we kind of went through that initial testing phase, we set up a pilot with a group of 7 libraries to go through training with them, customizations, how they could customize their own catalogs. And we also set up some customizations kind of off the bat for them. And in that time, we also did some research looking at just comparing like search relevancy and results between our current catalog and Aspen, just to have some data to, again, to talk everyone into it, and just some usability testing with patrons to identify ways that we can make the catalog better, but also kind of showing to also show our member libraries like, hey, these things are working a lot better than they were in our old catalog. And then from the pilot, we added a couple more libraries. Now we're adding our other batch, and we've done some work. We have 95 public libraries and then a few special libraries in schools. So we've worked with them individually for some of those customizations. And then, yeah, it's really been surprisingly smooth so far. In terms of communications, our libraries really have handled a lot of that, but Bywater provided some great templates in Canva, which have been very popular to help make some like quick start guides and bookmarks for patrons. So yeah, folks have been excited and getting the word out, and a lot of patrons don't even know there's a new catalog. They just see that it's a little bit different and better, and they kind of think it's just an extension of the library catalog they've been using, which is ideal.
Definitely say the fun thing with implementing all of the different sizes. Given how long we've been working on this, it's really fun to see all of the different sizes. I think one of the things we really value is all of the differences between libraries. Because everybody's using the catalog and we all have the same basic goals where we want to have all of our materials discoverable and that kind of thing. But how Sam is using it is significantly different than how Bob's using it, how Tara's using it. So we just love the opportunity to talk with everybody and really understand your libraries and how they work. And a prison library is significantly different than a public library, is significantly different than an academic library. So it's so fun and valuable to get to work with y'all on all of those, and then yeah, to have it be well, this is just the way it's supposed to work is always, it's really gratifying when we hear that from people, because that's what we want. We want it to work the way patrons expect, and we don't want that friction on implementation go live for people to say like, why'd you take away my catalog? It's like, well, this one just works better. So it's really fun. So.
Yeah, we take that, it just makes sense for granted in a lot of different other systems that we use every day. So it's definitely nice. So thanks for sharing about a little bit how you interact and we're able to work with your member libraries, your other like library partners and things. And let's just jump in, do like a little bit of shift into more of this open source community. It's been growing and changing a lot since maybe Sam and Bob have became members a couple years ago and to what we're seeing today. So I just wanted to ask, in what ways are you all, as not without us, without Bywater, but as libraries using Aspen Discovery, how are you guys able to connect and share resources and talk through things together?
Through meetings like this. We do a lot of kicking ideas around and then reaching out. Like we'll post something on Slack to the Aspen community. There's an Aspen community Slack for those that didn't know. You should join it. Say, hey, has anyone encountered this, or thinking of doing something or other? Trying not to reinvent the wheel constantly, because chances are someone else might be interested. Or if you are doing something that might be kind of cutting edge, sharing those things or your thought process behind them and inviting people to play and comment and whatnot. We had another library recently joined with Aspen. I don't think they'll mind a shout out. It's Darien Library. And to my mind, their SOPAC had been probably the best OPAC that was out there for a number of years, and certainly well integrated into their website. And so one day when I saw them join the Aspen community Slack, and then someone that works there start sending out questions and ideas, it was just like, wow, look at that. This is so awesome. Look who's joined our community.
Yeah, I think we take advantage of there's Aspen gatherings, that there's an exchange of ideas. There, yeah, Slack also. But a lot of times what happens is we're asking about a particular issue or a development we'd like to see, and then we hear back somebody else is thinking about that too. So that's another way that kind of happens. Is a lot of times there's just some congruent thinking and some congruent needs, but a lot of other times from going to some of those gathering meetings, you learn how different everybody's needs are. And back when it was just like Sam and I and not much else, you know, we could talk real closely about what our particular needs are, but now it's a much larger group of people. So you're getting a lot more input, and it's really fantastic because this stuff really works better when there's a variety of ideas, input, and solutions coming in.
We're the new kids on the block. But yeah, I would second everything you've said. Using Slack has been great. I'll say we recently started regular meetings with our fellow Cersei Dynex Aspen libraries, which has been super helpful to hear, because even within the same ILS, we do things so differently, and that also impacts Aspen. So that's been really great. And I will say we got on Aspen because we reached out to James at Nashville. Like, hey, tell us about your catalog, which I think at the time was not Aspen quite yet, but what was the earlier incarnation. And yeah, and now we're starting to get the same libraries reaching out like, hey, what do you think? So it's nice to have those, you know, just kind of those connections to help spread the word and talk to other folks about what their needs are.
So you guys mentioned the Aspen Gathering. So for people watching that might not know, as a group at Bywater, we invite everyone to join us monthly, to everyone in the community, anyone that's interested in Aspen. And we've been doing that now for over a year and a half, I'm not even sure, but it's been a while, and we get maybe, 30 to 40 members will come. We'll talk about priorities for developments, like any news, things like that, just to stay in touch. But something has kind of branched off from that, and we have a couple of people that are sort of like spearheading that. But can you all talk a little bit about the community meetings that you've started and kind of the purpose or the intention of those?
It's nice because there are a lot of different underlying ILSs that people use. It's nice to kind of meet in a, I don't know, vendor neutral space. Bywater is not quite like most other vendors in that regard. But even so, it's nice to have a user-led community group, community space. And I've been bad. I've missed the last couple, so Tara might be able to speak better to current goings on. But again, just a way to support one another as end users, help people feel like they're not alone, and build in some of that networking opportunity. Maybe to some degree help prioritize things that, we need to adjust this or fix that, or this would be a great idea. Potentially looking at some community sponsored initiatives down the road.
Covered everything, Sam. And we're about to have our third meeting, I believe. So I think you only missed one, but it might feel like a lot because we're in our early days. But yeah, so far it's been a good group and we've had lots of topics. Some, kind of some things that are like, oh, maybe we want Bywater to work on this development wise, to just like, can you add a library card to Apple Wallet? I don't know. General questions about, technology and our libraries. So it's been a good group.
I think one of the coolest things coming out of the community is it's always fun for me and for the entire Aspen team to see the community doing different things. And we'll every once in a while be, you did what with Aspen? How'd you manage to do that? And it's always like some cool theming things or just customization. So, and like one of the examples is, I think McKinney, Texas was the first one that did it. And they put a banner across the entire top of Aspen. And we just have libraries copying that and mimicking how that works. And everybody in the community is really generous with their time and knowledge, which is amazing. So other libraries can do that. And it kind of pushes us to be like, oh, maybe we should just make a default customization option for that and see what we can do to make it easier for libraries. But it's so fun to see all of the different ways that people are using it that we don't expect. So, and same with like Sam having the idea for, hey, how do we put all of our digital archives materials in and uploading them directly to the catalog? So the community is really our best source of ideas for things to make. So it's really cool.
This is a good example if you don't feel like you want to participate or have time for all the meetings. I've never been to this particular meeting. It's good to know it's there if I do want to attend, but it's not a particular meeting that I've gone to. So there are different levels of engagement, of course, you can have for sure.
And another thing that we're starting to see, and I don't think this is formal anywhere, but we're starting to see groups of users in a geographical area that, we get together with our consortium and we found out there's 5 or 6 other places using this stuff. And I think we're going to schedule our first group kind of a Zoom chat, or pandemic and weather permitting, going out to lunch at some point, and just kind of brainstorming more geographically as well. But this still just amazes me how involved someone can be if they so choose at any level of this.
So I was also thinking about the header, and I was going to use that same example because I just thought it was so cool. Like, we saw one library use it, and then Uinta was using it, and then another library was using it, and then Mark was just like, you know what? We're just gonna, in a future release, we're just gonna make it so like this is one of the default settings. And it was just like a little thing that knowing that a library started to use that customization, it allowed us to know that this was important to you, or like it was a priority to you, and then you wanted it to function. And I don't think that we would have thought about that if it wasn't for, libraries starting to like copy each other and start to use it and ask questions about it. So that's just been such a, like, from a design perspective, such a cool thing to see. And I think, Sam, you shouted out Darien, and I think the stuff that Amanda is doing and her team are doing at Darien is going to be another really push for all of us. And when they officially go live, I think if you haven't peeked or looked at her links that she's posted in Slack, it's going to blow a lot of people away. So we're excited to see what they're going to do with it. What other developments, or have you all brought forth? I know you all have, but have you brought forth ideas that you want to like brag about, or functionality that you are using in Aspen that you brought up? It was a conversation, and now you're using it.
Well, we typically get requests from our libraries and then go, well, it doesn't hurt to ask. So one example, I think we have the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Library, which always has a lot of interesting ideas. But One of the ones initially is they wanted to basically, instead of, they wanted to be able to directly load PDFs and attach them to existing records. And that really met their needs because you could request a physical copy or you could just download it. So that was kind of at that time brand new to the system, and it was just a matter of let's see if we can do this. Sure, you have that need, let's do that. So that's really our approach. For me, I not being in a library often these days, particularly since we're not doing all the traveling I was talking about earlier, these ideas wouldn't just come to me like a lightning strike, but our libraries have these needs that come out of the blue, and we just try to figure out a way to make them work. And so that's where most of our good innovation comes from, is from the ground up.
And say, I know we were really excited that Bywater was so game to add in some accessibility checking and enhancements, because that's definitely a big priority for us. So yeah, we really wanted to give our libraries the freedom to go wild and customize their catalogs to their heart's content. But we also wanted to make sure, people can read things, that there's not like, yellow links on a white background that patrons aren't going to be able to see. So Bywater built in some accessibility checking into the themes, so you can make sure everyone can read all your stuff and pick whatever colors you want. And that's been great. Everyone's been really happy with that and appreciates the kind of checking for them, so they don't have to like plug every decision into a little color contrast checker. And then, there's a lot of other stuff behind the scenes that helps a lot too, that I know folks are really appreciative of.
That helps us out a lot when a library wants to do something that is like a really bad idea, and we can just point to that and just say, I'm sorry, it's telling us no. We'll not let you use that yellow typeface. That's not going to work.
Blame Aspen, right? Sam, would you mind talking a little bit about Web Builder? Because that's what I was thinking about for you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot.
So for us, we have an overworked IT staff in the county, and I'd still be waiting for them to get around to the library's website. From my original request to them to work on it in about 2007. So, we'd probably get to it another 20 years. But so when we were talking with Mark about this, it was, well, let's do a proof of concept and let's see if we can build within Aspen, or what became Aspen, the ability to produce websites and basically use the thing as a CMS. The idea being that, sometimes I've got volunteers that are the ones that actually know the content of this particular program the best, and they ought to be able to at least draft up that information and put it up there. And so we iterated back and forth for a period of a couple of months until we felt like we had something that was good and workable. And there were a lot of innovation moments of, hey, we're entering the same information in 3 places. That should just be something that we can grab and plug in anywhere we want. And Mark jumped on those things as they came up. And then we went live. And then as other partners came in, they had some good ideas. And, oh, well, let's change this editor to do this thing. It makes it easier. And there's less hand coding. And so it's matured. And I think just about every release of Aspen, and they got one almost every month or sometimes more, has had some additional capability, minor tweak, adjustment with Web Builder. And so we use Web Builder exclusively as our website for our library. We're actually toying with how we can do that for our museum, actually, and set up a branch for a branch that's like called Heritage Museum, and see how that works. And that poses some unique proof of concept challenges as well. So we'll see what we end up doing there. But it's been a great tool. It's added a lot of capability. After about a year after we went live on Aspen, Wasatch County Library, a neighbor in Utah, joined us. And they had a similar issue with their IT. They're very good, talented, I should say, IT department. They're just overwhelmed. And Juan, their director, was able to jump in to Web Builder and get a website going, something that he can edit and change as needed, and which sounds like a minor thing, but when you're kind of the sole person doing this and a dozen other things, it's a really big deal to not have to go through the committee to get something changed on a website. More power to committees if you're of the scale where they come in handy. They definitely have their purpose, but anyway.
I'll add, we use the Web Builder not just for a full-scale website development, but it just allows for additional customization. Somebody wants links at the top, we can do that. Somebody wants to throw, like embed a video here. There's just a lot more flexibility that we have now. So even if our libraries aren't using it fully as a replacement for a website, there are a lot of applications there just to enhance the existing discovery.
Yeah, I've really noticed it recently. There's a lot of smaller libraries, like you said, maybe they don't even have an IT staff, and maybe someone created a WordPress, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, and they've still been using that. And it's just been really gratifying to especially see some of our smaller libraries have access to like a modern, easy to use website now, because we're seeing more and more libraries using it as their full not just OPAC, but their main library website. So we're just grateful that that was, one library's conversation, that now it's helping people in a completely different state across the country, and it's helping their, community access their library and get information. So I think that's just like one of the most amazing things about the open source community and why we wanted to talk today. Those are my thoughts, but I was wanting to ask you all, if you, for someone who, is watching who doesn't know much about open source or maybe interested in it, could you all share some kind of like either myths busting things or things that you like about open source that you could share?
Yeah, open source has a lot of different flavors and a lot of different models. We use Koha as our ILS, and that has a very different kind of community that is around it than Aspen is at this point. It's been around a lot longer. It's been global a lot longer, although that's changing with Aspen as well. So right now it's kind of an exciting time because even though it's a smaller community, things are really happening a lot faster than they are possible on Koha. But that's not like a bad thing for other types of open source models. You get there's a nice stability that exists in Koha, and a lot of people checking things, making sure they're right, that type of thing. So that's one thing I would say is open source is not just one size fits all. It kind of depends on the product and the community that's around it. I would also say the other misconception is that you're going to have to hire a lot of staff to make open source work, and that can be true, or you might be leveraging existing staff you have if you want to go it on your own and not go a supported route. And there's certainly a lot of libraries that have had a lot of success doing that, but we don't have like a dedicated web developer or anything like that on staff. We can't afford to do that. So going the hosted route for us allows us to not have to go spend a lot of staff time on a lot of things that Bywater is currently doing for us. So in other situations, it makes sense to go the other way. But that's kind of the cool thing about open source is you do have that option, and it's not a requirement that you have to have somebody doing coding and development on your staff. It is just but you can even be hosted and have somebody do coding. There's a lot of different ways to make it work.
I guess I could say we're sort of that. We are self-hosted, but we don't have a ton of staff for development. So we're definitely happy to have the development support. And yeah, certainly we couldn't have releases that's at the speed that Bywater is releasing, and that's been really great to have such frequent updates. And yeah, certainly we were before Aspen was available, we were very interested in Pica, but we're nervous, like, could we do this on our own? So yeah, having the support essentially meant kind of took it from like, I'm not sure we can do this, to like, yes, we can definitely confidently do this at a large scale.
I just echo what Tara and Bob said, but it's, you know, the free puppy thing again. There's some work or expectation of it at some point. And you know, the difference between the co-water and the co-hog community, and the Aspen one, Red Hat, any of those others, they're all, like Bob said, they all kind of have their unique ways of getting involved, and we're still discovering some of those within Aspen. So if you're interested in any of this and you want to get involved, now is a great time. You can help define what some of those needs and roles are. I think right now it's helping take the world of innovations that are out there and helping, you know, cue those up a little bit as the community's grown, as the user base has grown. There are some growing pains. What developments do you focus on? What do you say, oh, say, I'm sorry, that one, you can't use that yellow color, you know, doesn't pass muster. And you know, we haven't even talked about like so much else that's out there. Like, is it advantageous to develop smart speaker skills for things like library catalogs, discovery layers? You know, what do we do about privacy? What are the ethics of everything that we're working on? Who holds the intellectual property? Yes, it's open source. And did someone take time to legally organize and secure any of this property under one of those things, or is it just assumed? You know, some of those growing pains that come out of open source type projects. And when one thinks of these projects, I think the first thought is development or usability testing, but I think there's definitely a role for people to be involved in that side of it too. Like, you know, what can you do to help support and make sure that this IP stays open?
I'll add another thing about open source that makes me feel super excited to be in that is I just look at what's happening with proprietary software in the library world, and it is getting more and more consolidated. And if I were on one of those, I'd be very concerned about where that's going and what my options are. And will I be forced to migrate to a system maybe I didn't choose and incur that expense? So that's one thing that I think it used to be considered bold if you were part of open source, and that more and more now I think it's not so much bold as it is just maybe maybe not all cases, but in a lot of cases a smarter place to be, looking at kind of where things are headed.
We totally agree. I can say that. Well, I think the really great thing about like working in libraries too is that we know like the needs of libraries are forever changing if the last 2 years hasn't, you know, showed us anything. And the ability to be able to respond in such a quick and intuitive manner, I think, for the future is just like what really excites me about open source, is and the way that you all and your ideas and your direct like input from your communities are pushing it forward every day is just, it's amazing to see. Even in the last like 2 years, sometimes I'll go back and look at like our old tutorial videos or something, and it's just amazing to see like how far we've come. And that's because of, you know, direct involvement from libraries across globally now, and listening and responding to their communities. So if anyone has any other like final thoughts, I think that's a really good stopping point. We appreciate your time as always. Okay, I'm gonna call it then, and we're gonna get excited for PLA in 2 weeks, which is our first in-person national conference in 2 years. This was the last one that we attended in March of 2020, and I think the week after, the day after, the week something, everything changed. So we're very excited to be there again. Jesse?
We'll be at booth 1216, so make sure you stop by and say hello. We're excited to see our partners.
All right, well, come to the community meeting March 15th. And you can find us every month at the Aspen Gathering, the first Thursday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, y'all.